Hey, what is going on, guys? In this video today, we're going to be going over how to become a better builder and win more build fights in Fortnite. As we all know by now, building is probably the most unique and skill gap defining part of the entire game. It's now very difficult to be successful as a Fortnite player unless you're at least a somewhat competent builder. And when it comes to improving your building skills, I have a somewhat unique view on the best ways to do that. And we'll definitely go more in depth about what I mean by that at the beginning part of this video. So without further ado, let's get right into it. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about in this video today is a major mistake that a lot of players make when it comes to trying to improve their building. And that mistake is focusing way too much on super advanced building techniques. There are a ton of building tip videos on YouTube and various other platforms that mainly focus on very advanced and very situational building tricks. And I'm not trying to say that's a bad thing or anything, because for a certain demographic of players, those tips can actually be pretty helpful. However, I think it's safe to say that about 99% of Fortnite players are never going to be able to implement something like a double 90 fake cone side jump into their actual gameplay. It simply requires a certain amount of mechanical skill, reaction time, and quick thinking that incredibly few players actually have. And honestly, I feel like a lot of those super advanced building techniques are so incredibly situational that even if you could totally master them, how often are you really going to be able to use what you practiced in actual games? Plus, here's the thing, you can still be an incredibly great builder, even if you're someone that isn't able to do that insane fake cone side jump ramp rush that you saw in a video. If you want proof of this, really pay close attention next time you're watching any of the pros play. Yeah, sure, every once in a while you may see some really advanced stuff, but the majority of the time it's going to be relatively basic building maneuvers. The reason why they're pros is because they take those simple maneuvers and do them a lot faster and smarter than the average player. And if you're willing to settle for someone that isn't quite pro level, I think my gameplay reflects what I'm saying pretty well. I mean, I personally consider myself a pretty good Fortnite player, yet some of these crazy building tricks I see online just make my head spin. That's why with the way I build, I really try to prioritize effectiveness over flashiness. So I think that the gist of what I'm trying to say here is that unless you're an incredibly skilled builder who plays a ton of creative / playground 1v1s, you don't really need to stress over knowing every crazy building technique in the book. Because if you're just looking to improve your building as a way to become a better Fortnite player in general, there are much more important and relevant things to focus on. Just to throw out some quick examples, one of those things would be improving the speed and consistency of your 90s. Nobody considers basic 90s some kind of crazy advanced thing, but they're incredibly important for winning Fortnite build fights. Now, contrary to what some people believe, the player with the faster 90s isn't going to win every time, but 90s are a building technique you're probably going to use in a solid amount of the build fights you get into, so improving your speed will actually make a pretty big difference. Another relatively simple yet incredibly important thing to work on are basic high ground retakes. High ground retakes are one of those aspects of building where even though there are a bunch of super advanced combos out there, you can get by perfectly fine with just the relatively simple stuff. Again, if you want to use my gameplay as an example, whenever you see me retaking high ground in a build fight, I'm probably not doing anything too crazy. It's usually either 90s, double ramping over my head so I'm protected from players at an angle above me, or probably the most advanced thing I do is single ramping, and then flooring / pyramiding in front of me to block shots from anybody directly above me. I truly believe all of those techniques are so much easier to practice and improve while also being so much more useful in actual game scenarios. I'll say it again, unless you're literally a mechanical god, speed and consistency are gonna beat flashiness and craziness almost every single time. Now let's move on to another common mistake I see with lesser skilled builders in Fortnite. And that is the fact that when they're in any kind of a build fight, they only have two modes, building mode and shooting mode. And more importantly, they aren't able to quickly transition between those two modes. We've talked a few times before on this channel about the negatives of overbuilding, and at the end of the day, it's a fairly simple concept to grasp. If you're consistently building with the building menu out, you plain and simple won't be able to deal any damage to enemies. But there's also a flip side to that problem, and that's someone in a build fight who, I guess if the original term is overbuilding, they would be considered an overshooter. An overshooter in my mind is someone who gets some kind of an advantage in a build fight, and that most commonly will be getting high ground, and then the only thing they're worried about is dealing damage. Is that a better way to play than someone who just keeps building to the sky without ever pulling out their weapon? Yeah, I would probably say yes to that. But don't get it twisted, the dealing damage tunnel vision mindset is not something you want to shoot for. It's actually pretty easy to counter a player who just builds to the sky and then sits on high ground shooting their AR like a mounted turret. First off, when you have high ground and you go into a mode of focusing solely on shooting your weapon, you open yourself up to having high ground retaken from you. And trust me, if you're dealing with a very good builder that's mastered quick retakes like we briefly talked about earlier, they'll be able to get 2 to 3 levels above you ridiculously quickly. And if that happens, you're probably gonna end up losing that fight. On top of that, shooting an AR from high ground doesn't put enough pressure on good builders. Yeah, if you run into someone who isn't that great at the game, you may be able to land 3 or 4 shots before they can react and get a quick down. But a good player, on the other hand, is going to be aware of the fact that you're positioned on high ground above them, and they'll be able to protect themselves from most, if not all, of your shots. So if overbuilding and overshooting both aren't the answer, well then how should you handle build fights? The answer to that question isn't a super simple one, but you basically need to be able to instantly, effortlessly, and constantly switch your mindset between building and shooting. If you're able to do that, then you'll be able to stay 2 to 3 levels above your enemy, which in my opinion is the sweet spot for dealing damage and still being able to keep high ground. That's because you're close enough to deal considerable shotgun and SMG damage, while still having enough distance to keep high ground. But if you enter either tunnel vision building or tunnel vision shooting mode, you're either going to miss opportunities to deal damage or lose high ground. You basically want to find the perfect balance where you're shooting when opportunities present themselves, but building whenever your high ground gets challenged. And that's something that you can really only learn by getting in build fight situations against competent players. So that can be in creative mode 1v1s against your friend or actual in-game build fights. As long as you're learning and improving, it really doesn't matter. The final thing I want to cover in this video is a super underappreciated skill of building that's only become more important due to recent gameplay changes. And that is being able to keep track of your materials. I know it may sound incredibly simple, but really hear me out here. Now that the material cap in Fortnite is 1,500 as opposed to 3,000, keeping track of how many materials you have and revolving your playstyle around that amount is more important than ever. Plus, now that it's easier to farm materials and every player drops a guaranteed 150 on death, the amount of materials you have can change in a major way incredibly quickly. This is honestly one of my biggest struggles at the moment, especially in early game situations and also in solo squads games. All the time in early game situations, I'll have very little materials, and I'll smartly be playing as if I have very little materials. I'll try to stick to the inside of buildings and other close quarter areas where building options are limited. Only problem is, in the middle of a chaotic fight, I walked over 130 wood, 50 brick, and 50 metal without even noticing it. The opposite of that is what happens to me in crazy fights against multiple really good players. I'll constantly be building because they're putting so much pressure on me, and I'll be so locked in and focused on my next move that I won't realize I'm now down to 40 total materials. Then when that happens, I, much like everybody else, will complain that I only died because I ran out of mats, but to be real with you, I deserve at least some of the blame for that. If I had just taken a split second to glance at the lower right hand side of my screen, I would have stopped pushing for high ground as soon as I got lower than maybe 200 materials. It may sound kinda stupid, but it's actually crazy how much better I play when I'm playing with someone else, and while they're spectating me, they give me a quick heads up of how many materials I have left. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you watched the entire thing, be sure to let me know with a comment down the comment section below. This video was about how to become a better builder in Fortnite, so I want to know, what aspect of your building do you feel you're best at, and what do you feel you're worst at? Be sure to leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, turn on post notifications, do whatever the heck you want, and I will catch you guys next time.